Two figures take their seats across from one another, the air already thick with anticipation. On one side, the quiet certainty of Ben Carson, once a surgeon who held lives in his hands, now wielding questions like scalpels, confident that precision alone will win the day. On the other, Jasmine Crockett, sharp-eyed, unflinching, carrying the fire of those who have been told to wait their turn and refused. This is not just a meeting of minds. This is a collision of worlds. From the first moment, the clash feels inevitable. Carson leans on his reputation, a man who believes calmness is power, who trusts that a measured tone can disarm his opponent before the battle even begins. But Crockett radiates something different. She carries with her the voice of those too often silenced, the weight of generations demanding not politeness, but truth. Every gesture, every look is charged with that restless energy. The audience senses what's coming. This won't be a polite exchange dressed in decorum. This will be a test, a trial of two visions of America colliding in real time. The surgeon's blade against the advocate's fire, logic against lived experience. And then it happens. Carson poses his question, steady and deliberate. For a moment it feels like victory is already his, but what follows will not be the quiet dominance he expects. It will be a turning point, a single fact, waiting like a spark, ready to ignite everything. Ben Carson's story begins in the operating room, where his steady hands and soft-spoken manner made him a legend, a man who built his name on precision, on the kind of control that can separate life from death. To his admirers, Carson embodies restraint, intellect, and an almost unshakable calm. When he entered politics, he carried that same aura. The surgeon who had seen chaos up close and believed that order, logic, and patience could tame even the fiercest debates. In his presence, words fall like measured instruments, careful, exact, intended to cut away illusion and leave only truth. He represents the establishment's idea of respectability, composure as credibility, calmness as authority. But across from him sits Jasmine Crockett, and she does not play by those rules. Where Carson is stillness, Crockett is motion. Where he waits, she strikes. Born from the grit of community battles and the frustration of voices ignored, Crockett has carved her space not by speaking softly, but by speaking loudly, unapologetically, without fear of ruffling the feathers of power. She does not hide her anger when injustice demands fury. She does not bow to politeness when silence would mean surrender. Her presence carries the rhythm of protest chants, the urgency of lived struggle, the raw energy of a generation unwilling to wait politely for recognition. The contrast is cinematic. Carson, the composed tactician, sits cloaked in quiet confidence. Crockett, the disruptor, arrives like a storm, wielding not just rhetoric but righteous indignation. And while Carson assumes the mantle of challenger, it is Crockett who embodies the underdog hero, armed with defiance, ready to rise from the margins to the center of the story. Two combatants, two visions, one inevitable collision. When Ben Carson finally leans forward, the energy in the room shifts. He does not rush. He never rushes. His cadence is deliberate, his words measured as though he were back in the operating room, scalpel in hand, knowing that one clean incision could decide the outcome. To him, debate is no different. Remove the excess. Expose the weakness and deliver the blow so subtly that by the time it lands, the opponent has already lost. His voice is calm, almost soothing as he frames his question. There is no raised tone, no flourish of performance. Instead, Carson presents what seems like an unshakable premise, a carefully crafted trap cloaked in the language of reason. The question itself hangs in the air with surgical precision, designed to appear irrefutable, leaving Crockett with only two options: concede ground or flail in defense. To his supporters, it feels like a masterclass in quiet dominance. The audience leans in. For a moment, the stage belongs entirely to him. Here is the seasoned figure, relying on the authority of intellect, poised to corner his younger, fiery opponent. Carson's demeanor communicates certainty. He has set the terms, defined the battlefield, and now waits to watch her stumble across it. There is almost a smugness in his stillness. a confidence that comes from years of being underestimated, yet triumphing through intellect alone. He believes the knockout has already been delivered, that Crockett's passion will collapse against the cold steel of logic. But beneath the calm surface of his words lies something else, the assumption that truth is only his to wield. That reason alone can silence lived experience. And it is in that assumption, invisible to him, where the seeds of reversal are planted. Because what follows will not be a stumble. It will be a counterstrike no one, least of all Carson, expected. The question lands, crisp and deliberate, and for a moment the silence that follows is louder than the words themselves. Carson sits back with the confidence of a man convinced he has already won. The audience feels the weight of his certainty. It is the silence of a surgeon watching the anesthesia take hold, convinced the patient is fully under. But Jasmine Crockett does not rush to answer. She leans into the stillness, letting it breathe, letting it grow. Her eyes hold steady, her posture unshaken. Every second of pause transforms the room into a theater of suspense. People shift in their seats, waiting, wondering. Has she been cornered? Has Carson delivered the checkmate he promised with his composure? The trap seems airtight. Yet beneath the quiet, something is stirring. Crockett's pause is not hesitation. It is calculation. It is the gathering of a storm behind her eyes. She hears the question not as a verdict, but as an opening, an invitation to unleash something far heavier than Carson ever imagined. The silence stretches. Then, just as doubt begins to creep into the room, the shift arrives. Subtle, electric. The look on her face changes, the kind of look that says a reversal is already forming. And in that instant, before a single word leaves her lips, the audience senses it. Carson is not about to witness surrender. He is about to witness demolition. When Jasmine Crockett finally speaks, her voice cuts through the silence like a sudden crack of thunder. There is no rush, no panic, no scrambling for words. Instead, she delivers a single fact, sharp and unflinching, aimed directly at the hollow core of Carson's question. It is not a scatter of arguments, not a tangle of rhetoric. It is one clean strike. And in that moment, the calm fortress Carson built collapses. The power of her response lies not in volume, but in precision. She does not need to shout, because the weight of truth does the work for her. With surgical clarity of her own, Crockett reveals the flaw so obvious, so undeniable that Carson's premise crumbles before he can even assemble a defense. The brilliance is in its simplicity. One fact, impossible to dispute, that strips his question of the authority he thought it carried. The room reacts instantly. A ripple of recognition moves through the audience. Gasps, quiet laughter, even the muffled sound of approval from those who know what it means to watch an underdog flip the script. What Carson believed was his checkmate is revealed to be nothing more than an empty gesture, shattered under the weight of Crockett's truth. And in that instant, the roles reverse. Carson, once the hunter, suddenly looks like the hunted. The question he crafted with such composure becomes his undoing, transformed from weapon to weakness. Crockett does not gloat. She does not need to. Her fact hangs in the air, undeniable, irrefutable, commanding the stage in a way no flourish ever could. It wasn't just an answer. It was a demolition. A strike so swift and decisive that the moment will live long after the words themselves fade. And as the echo settles, one truth becomes undeniable. Ben Carson did not corner Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine Crockett cornered him, and she did it with nothing more than the power of fact. The fact lands, and for a heartbeat the room forgets how to breathe. Silence hangs heavy, but it is not Carson's silence anymore. It belongs to Crockett now, and it reverberates with authority. Eyes widen, heads turn. People are not merely listening, they are witnessing. Then comes the ripple. A low murmur sweeps across the audience, the sound of disbelief colliding with recognition. Some stifle laughter, others shake their heads in awe, while a few exchange glances that say what no words can. Did that just happen? The tension that once favored Carson now breaks apart, scattering in every direction, leaving him exposed under the weight of Crockett's precision. Reaction shots tell the story without language. Supporters of Carson wear shock like a mask, their certainty fractured. Allies of Crockett cannot hide the quiet thrill rising in their expressions, as though they've just watched a long-awaited moment of vindication. Even those caught in the middle lean forward, unable to deny the power of what they've seen. Crockett sits steady, not triumphant in display but unshakable in presence. She doesn't need to raise her voice. She doesn't need to perform. The fact speaks for her, louder than any applause could. In that stillness, she no longer looks like the fiery underdog fighting for space. She looks like the center of gravity itself, the one commanding the room without even moving. The shift is complete. What began as Carson's stage has become Crockett's arena, and as the murmurs fade back into silence, one truth crystallizes. This clash will not be remembered for the question. It will be remembered for the answer. The brilliance of Crockett's response was not only in the truth she revealed, but in the way it dismantled Carson's entire strategy. Carson framed his question like a puzzle with only one correct solution, expecting Crockett to fumble within the lines he had drawn. But her fact did more than answer. It ripped apart the frame itself, exposing the hidden assumptions beneath his calm delivery. Carson's weapon was precision. He relied on logic stripped of context, a question designed to sound airtight when detached from lived reality. It was the classic establishment tactic. Reduce struggle to abstract terms. Ask the kind of question that seems unassailable until someone reminds you of the world beyond the words. Crockett's fact pierced that abstraction. It carried the weight of lived truth, a reality that logic alone could not contain. What made it devastating was its simplicity. She didn't bury him under statistics. She didn't wander into lengthy debate. Instead, she chose one undeniable point, one sharp truth that shattered the illusion of control. It was a reminder that facts are not neutral. They carry history, they carry struggle, they carry the voices of those who have been told they do not belong. Crockett's fact was more than information. It was representation. And that is why it landed so hard, because it wasn't just a rebuttal to Carson. It was a rebuttal to every moment when calm authority has been used to dismiss righteous anger, when establishment figures have assumed that intellect alone could silence the urgency of justice. Crockett's strike echoed with cultural resonance, the truth of someone who knows the ground she stands on, who speaks not just for herself, but for a larger fight that stretches across generations. In that moment, Carson's question ceased to be the center of the story. What mattered was Crockett's fact, the kind of truth that cannot be brushed aside. It was a reminder that sometimes the sharpest scalpel in the room is not the question asked, but the answer that refuses to be contained. For a man who built his legacy on unshakable composure, Carson's reaction told its own story. The calm mask remained on his face, but beneath it the certainty had slipped. His eyes shifted, his posture tightened, the kind of subtle tells that reveal when confidence has been rattled. For the first time in the exchange, the silence did not feel deliberate. It felt defensive. He tried to recover, to lean back into the comfort of dismissal, offering a faint smile as if to suggest the fact was trivial, unworthy of acknowledgement. But the attempt rang hollow. Every word he might have spoken carried the risk of sounding desperate. Every second of pause made the crack in his armor more visible. Carson had spent a career mastering control, yet here, control was slipping through his fingers. The brilliance of Crockett's strike was that it left him with no safe path forward. To challenge her fact outright would expose him further. To acknowledge it would concede defeat, and so he lingered in the uneasy middle, half dismissive, half silent, neither defense nor surrender, but a limbo that made his vulnerability unmistakable. For those watching, the contrast was undeniable. The calm tactician who entered the room commanding authority now looked like a man searching for footing. Crockett had not just answered his question. She had turned the entire stage upside down. And in that imbalance, Carson's aura of certainty was gone, leaving Crockett as the voice ascendant. What unfolded between Carson and Crockett was never just about a single question. It was about two Americas colliding in real time, one rooted in tradition, hierarchy, and the authority of calm expertise, and the other forged in urgency, disruption, and the demand for unflinching truth. Ben Carson embodies the old model of leadership: quiet, orderly, steeped in the belief that composure is the highest form of credibility. His presence recalls a political style where intellect was defined narrowly, where authority was measured by how little emotion one showed. To his supporters, he is stability personified, a reminder of when politics was framed as debate within polished boundaries. Jasmine Crockett, by contrast, represents the insurgent energy reshaping the landscape. Her fire is not a flaw, it is her weapon. She channels the voices of communities long told to temper their anger, to wait their turn, to speak softly in rooms built to drown them out. Her style is not about preserving decorum, but about breaking it open, making space for truths that have too often been ignored. Where Carson's calm projects control, Crockett's passion projects survival, urgency, and the audacity to redefine what leadership can sound like. This clash was mythic because it symbolized more than two individuals. It symbolized a generational and cultural turning point. The old guard of careful authority facing the rising force of unapologetic confrontation. One leaned on a legacy of respectability. The other wielded the raw power of fact sharpened by lived experience. And in this moment, that fact, the one that demolished Carson's premise, did more than win an exchange. It signaled that the balance of power was shifting. The future would not belong to the calm certainty of the past. It would belong to the voices brave enough to disrupt it. Sometimes, all it takes is one fact, one truth, spoken at the right moment to turn a confrontation into a revelation. What began as Carson's stage ended as Crockett's triumph, a reminder that power does not always lie with the one who asks the question. It can just as easily shift to the one brave enough to answer with clarity and conviction. Crockett's strike was not just about winning an argument. It was about reclaiming space, about proving that authority does not belong only to the calm and composed, but also to those who carry fire in their voices and truth in their bones. Her moment was proof that the underdog can flip the script, that the overlooked can seize control of the narrative in an instant. And if this was only the beginning, one clash, one fact, one spark, then the real question is this: what happens when that fire spreads? Stay tuned, the story is only just beginning.